When my wife, Emily, first brought up the idea of me applying for a promotion, I didn't think much of it. She always had a knack for believing in my potential even when I didn't. "You've been with the company for years, Jack. You deserve to move up," she said one night over dinner, her eyes sparkling with encouragement. She didn't just say it. She meant it. The promotion was tempting. A higher salary, a bigger office, the respect I'd been craving. But the process seemed daunting. The competition was fierce, and most of my colleagues seemed to be better connected, especially with Mr. Hammond, our boss. I couldn't deny that I felt like an outsider at times. Emily brushed away my hesitations. "You're more than capable," she said, clasping my hand. "You'll see. Things have a way of working out." Looking back, I realize her enthusiasm wasn't just about my career advancement. The shift began subtly. Emily started attending events at my office more frequently, insisting that it was important for me to network. "I'll help break the ice," she joked. At first, I was grateful. She had an effortless charm that drew people in, and her presence at the office parties boosted my confidence. She even hit it off with Mr. Hammond during a charity gala hosted by the company, laughing at his jokes and impressing him with her wit. I saw it as a good sign, until I didn't. Then there were her sudden evening outings. Emily, who rarely went out without me, started mentioning last-minute plans. "Just catching up with an old friend," she'd say, waving me off with a quick kiss. Her explanations seemed plausible, and I had no reason to doubt her. But the unease started creeping in when she began bringing up Mr. Hammond more often than usual. "Did you know Mr. Hammond used to be in the Navy? He's got so many interesting stories," she mentioned casually one evening. I nodded absent-mindedly, chalking it up to her genuine interest in people. Weeks turned into months, and I threw myself into preparing for the promotion. The long hours at the office left little time for anything else. If Emily was out late or busy texting on her phone, I assumed she was helping me behind the scenes, maybe nudging Mr. Hammond about my capabilities. After all, she wanted this for me, too. Or so I thought. One Friday evening, as I returned home exhausted, Emily wasn't there. A hastily written note lay on the counter. "Out for a work-related meeting. Don't wait up." I stared at it for longer than necessary, something about it prickling at the edges of my mind. I brushed it off, poured myself a drink, and tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. The promotion announcement was just a week away, and I convinced myself that the unease I felt was just nerves. Emily was my rock. She always had been. There was no reason to suspect anything else. The following week passed in a blur of anticipation. Every interaction with Mr. Hammond left me dissecting his tone, his words, and his expressions. Did he see me as a contender? Was there something I could have done differently? Emily, as always, was my cheerleader, her reassurances filling the silences when my self-doubt threatened to overwhelm me. On Tuesday night, she insisted I stay late at work to finalize my presentation for the upcoming review. "The promotion is yours if you nail this," she said, her hand on my shoulder. "Don't let up now." I agreed and stayed at my desk until the building was nearly empty. As I packed up, I noticed Mr. Hammond's office light still on. It wasn't unusual. He was known for his long hours. What was unusual was Emily's car parked in the lot as I left. I paused, staring at the familiar silver sedan illuminated by the streetlights. My first thought was practical. Had she come to surprise me? Maybe she brought me dinner or coffee, knowing I'd be working late. My chest warmed at the idea, but as I glanced back toward the building, a sinking feeling replaced that warmth. Emily hadn't called or texted, which wasn't like her. I hesitated, gripping my briefcase tighter, and decided to walk back inside. The air felt different as I entered the lobby. The usual quiet of the late hour carried an edge I couldn't place. I waved at the night guard, Greg, who barely looked up from his newspaper. "Forgot something," I mumbled as I headed toward the elevators. When I stepped off on my floor, the faint murmur of voices drifted from Mr. Hammond's office. His door, usually closed, was slightly ajar. I stopped in my tracks, unsure of what I was hearing. A laugh, Emily's laugh, floated into the corridor, soft but unmistakable. My first instinct was to turn around and leave. Whatever conversation they were having was probably innocent, right? Emily was personable, and Hammond was a charmer. There was no reason to assume the worst. But something rooted me in place, my feet unwilling to move. I took a step closer, straining to hear. But their voices were low, indistinct. Another step brought me near the door, where I caught a fragment of their conversation. "Make sure he gets it," Emily said, her tone unusually soft. "I'll handle it," Hammond replied, his voice smooth and reassuring. Something about the intimacy of their exchange felt wrong. I wanted to burst in, demand an explanation, but I was too stunned to act. Instead, I turned on my heel and left as quickly as I could. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the scene over and over, searching for a rational explanation. She was probably discussing my promotion with him, I told myself. It made sense. Emily cared about my career and wanted me to succeed. But the gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. The next morning, Emily acted as though nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, wished me luck for the day, and even packed me a lunch. Her usual warmth felt like a wall between us, an invisible barrier that made me second-guess my suspicions. I decided to push it out of my mind. The review was 2 days away, and I couldn't afford distractions. But deep down, I knew that something had shifted, something I couldn't yet define. 2 days later, the big review arrived. I sat across from Mr. Hammond in his expansive office, the weight of his gaze heavy as he assessed my presentation. I was confident in my work. Emily had drilled into me how well prepared I was. But Hammond's unreadable expression made me question everything. "You've done solid work here, Jack," he said finally, setting his pen down. "I see potential in you, and I think you'll grow into the role." Relief washed over me, but his next words cut through it like a blade. "I'll need to discuss a few final points with the board. In the meantime, keep doing what you're doing." A polite dismissal, but no confirmation. I plastered on a smile, thanked him, and left the office feeling hollow. Had I impressed him or not? When I got home, Emily was waiting with a bottle of wine and a wide smile. "How'd it go?" she asked, practically bouncing on her heels. "Fine, I think," I replied, loosening my tie. "He said I'm in the running, but there are still final points to discuss." Emily's expression faltered for a fraction of a second, so quick I almost missed it. "That's a good sign," she said, recovering quickly. "They wouldn't even consider you if they didn't see your value." She poured us both a glass of wine, raising hers in a toast. "Here's to your bright future." I clinked my glass with hers, but the tightness in my chest didn't ease. That night, as Emily showered, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it out of habit, expecting a message from one of her friends, but the screen lit up with a name I recognized immediately, Hammond. The message preview read, "You handled everything perfectly. He doesn't suspect." My stomach flipped, and I froze, staring at the screen as the rest of the text disappeared. I wanted to grab the phone, unlock it, and read the full message, but Emily's voice called out from the bathroom. "Can you grab me a towel?" I jumped, my heart hammering. Snatching a towel from the linen closet, I handed it to her through the cracked door and returned to the bedroom, where her phone lay dark and still. I couldn't bring myself to look at it again. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing with possibilities. What didn't I suspect? Was this about my promotion, or was it something else? When Emily emerged from the bathroom, I tried to act normal, but my questions must have been written all over my face. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. That night, I couldn't sleep. The message looped in my mind like a broken record. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was nothing, just another work-related text. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was starting to grow. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work, hoping to drown out my unease. Mr. Hammond remained cordial but distant, his usual confidence an impenetrable mask. My interactions with Emily were equally puzzling. Her warmth felt rehearsed, her encouragement slightly too enthusiastic. I noticed things I hadn't before. How she always seemed to have her phone in her hand. How quickly she'd swipe away notifications when I entered the room. She started leaving earlier for errands and returning later than expected, her explanations vague. "Just a busy day," she'd say with a tired smile, leaning in to kiss me. "You've got nothing to worry about." but I was worried. One evening, I stayed late at the office again, partly to avoid the tension at home. Greg, the night guard, greeted me with his usual cheer as I grabbed a coffee from the break room. "You're putting in a lot of hours lately," he remarked. "Big things coming up," I replied, half smiling. Greg gave me a knowing nod, but then his brow furrowed. "Hey, don't take this the wrong way, but I've been noticing something strange." My stomach tightened. "Strange how?" "Well," he began, scratching his head, "your wife's been visiting a lot. Not just during the day either, sometimes at night. She's always headed up to Hammond's office." The air seemed to leave the room. "She said she's helping with something for you," Greg added quickly, as if to soften the blow. "Didn't mean to pry, just thought you should know." I forced a smile, mumbling my thanks before retreating to my desk. My mind reeled with possibilities. What help could Emily be offering Hammond that required late-night visits? Greg's words hung over me like a storm cloud, and by the time I returned home, I was too drained to confront Emily. She greeted me with her usual cheer, but I couldn't shake the image of her walking into Hammond's office under the cover of night. For the next few days, I tried to act normal, hoping to catch her off guard. My suspicions grew with every offhand comment, every unexplained absence. One night, when she left for another errand, I made up my mind. I would find out the truth, no matter the cost. Determined to uncover what was happening, I reached out to Greg the next day. Under the guise of casual conversation, I steered the topic back to Emily's late-night visits. "You sure it was her?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Positive," Greg said, leaning on his desk. "She's always friendly, waves at the camera when she comes in. I've seen her head straight to Hammond's office a few times. Sometimes, they're up there for hours." Hours. The word sent a chill down my spine. "Did you ever notice anything unusual?" Greg hesitated. "Look, I don't want to stir the pot, but once or twice I thought I heard voices, laughing, coming from his office after hours." My blood ran cold, but I forced a laugh. "Probably just work talk. Hammond's a big fan of late meetings." Greg shrugged. "Maybe, but if you ever want me to keep an eye on things, just say the word." "Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it." That evening, I couldn't focus on anything but the weight of Greg's words. Emily came home late again, claiming she'd been shopping for something special to celebrate my potential promotion. She pulled a bag from the trunk with a triumphant smile and showed me a sleek designer watch. "For you," she said, sliding it onto my wrist. I stared at the watch, its silver band glinting under the kitchen lights. "You didn't have to do this," I murmured, caught between gratitude and unease. "Of course I did," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "You're going to get that promotion, Jack. I can feel it." Her words felt hollow, as though they were meant more to reassure herself than me. Later that night, while she slept soundly beside me, I found myself staring at the ceiling, unable to rest. My mind returned to Greg's offer to keep an eye on things. It was time to take him up on it. The next day, I approached Greg with my plan. "Is there a way to review the security footage from Hammond's office?" I asked, feigning casual curiosity. Greg rubbed his chin. "Technically, I'm not supposed to show you without authorization. But if something doesn't sit right with you, I'll see what I can do." That evening, after most of the staff had gone home, Greg waved me over to his desk. "I've got the footage queued up. You might want to sit down for this." The screen flickered to life, showing the lobby entrance. Emily appeared, dressed in a sleek black dress, smiling brightly as she waved at the camera. She strode confidently toward the elevators, disappearing inside. Greg fast-forwarded the footage to later in the evening. The timestamp showed well past midnight, and the camera caught her exiting Hammond's office, her hair slightly disheveled, her laughter echoing faintly in the corridor. My throat tightened. "Want me to keep digging?" Greg asked cautiously. I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, please." I left the office that night with my chest heavy, the evidence mounting. The nagging voice in my head screamed that I needed answers, and fast. By now, my doubts had turned into a festering certainty. The late-night visits, the messages on her phone, the footage, it all pointed to something I didn't want to face. I had to know how far it went. The next day, Greg pulled me aside. I found more, he said, his tone serious. This might be tough to watch. I braced myself as he played the footage. This time, the angle shifted to an internal hallway camera near Mr. Hammond's office. Emily and Hammond were standing close, their body language intimate. Hammond said something that made Emily laugh, and she placed a hand on his arm. A moment later, he stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Greg paused the footage. Do you want me to keep going? No, I said sharply, then softened my tone. No, that's enough. I didn't need to see more to understand what was happening. That evening, I confronted Emily. She was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The sight of her, calm, cheerful, acting as though nothing was amiss, only made the betrayal cut deeper. Emily, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She turned, a curious smile on her face. What's up? I know. Her expression faltered, confusion flickering in her eyes. Know what? About you and Hammond. The late-night visits. The messages. The intimacy. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it. But then her shoulders slumped, and she looked away. Jack, she began, her voice trembling. Don't, I said, holding up a hand. Don't try to explain it away. I want the truth. All of it. She hesitated, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. It's not what you think, she said finally. It was never about him. It was about you. Me? I asked, incredulous. I wanted you to get that promotion, she said, tears pooling in her eyes. You've worked so hard, and I thought. You thought what? I interrupted, my voice rising. That sleeping with my boss would help me? That betraying me was the solution? I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered, her voice breaking. It started as harmless flirting, a way to get you on his radar. But then you crossed the line, I finished for her. Emily reached for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. The woman I had trusted with everything had shattered the foundation of our life together. I need time to think, I said, my voice cold. Don't wait up. I grabbed my keys and left, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me with every step. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I spent the night driving aimlessly, trying to piece together what had gone so catastrophically wrong. Emily's betrayal gnawed at me, but what stung more was the realization that she justified it as a way to help me. The thought made me sick. By the time the sun rose, I was parked outside the office building. Exhausted but resolute, I decided I couldn't let this fester any longer. I had to know everything, every detail. Greg, ever the quiet ally, greeted me with a knowing look when I approached his desk. I didn't expect to see you this early, he said, sipping his coffee. I need to see more, I said bluntly. If there's anything else on those tapes, I want to know. Greg hesitated, then nodded. Come on. He led me to the security room, where he pulled up a new batch of footage. This time, the video wasn't from the hallway, but from Hammond's office itself. I hadn't realized there were internal cameras. Maintenance had these installed a while back after an equipment theft, Greg explained. They're not obvious, but they're there. My stomach churned as the video played. There was Emily, sitting on the edge of Hammond's desk, her legs crossed casually, her smile warm and inviting. Hammond leaned back in his chair, his body language comfortable, his gaze lingering on her. Greg fast-forwarded through the mundane conversation, stopping when things escalated. Hammond stood, moving closer to Emily, and she didn't back away. When he placed his hands on her hips, she didn't stop him. I couldn't watch anymore. That's enough, I said, my voice hoarse. Greg stopped the video, his expression somber. What are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. But I'm done pretending this isn't happening. I left the security room with a copy of the footage, my mind swirling with emotions. Anger, betrayal, humiliation, they all vied for dominance. By the time I returned home, I had a plan. Emily was in the living room, looking anxious. She stood as I walked in, her eyes searching mine for a clue to what I was thinking. We need to talk, I said curtly. She nodded, wringing her hands. Jack, Save it, I interrupted. I know everything. Her face went pale. I've seen the footage, Emily. All of it. I continued, my voice hard. You didn't just flirt with Hammond. You didn't just try to help me. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt nothing but cold detachment. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, I said firmly. You're not sorry. You're sorry you got caught. I grabbed my suitcase from the bedroom and started packing. Jack, please, she begged, following me. We can work through this. I made a mistake, but I love you. I stopped and turned to face her, my expression as cold as my tone. You didn't make a mistake, Emily. You made a choice. And now you have to live with the consequences. With that, I left the house, determined to take back control of my life. But I wasn't done yet. Revenge wasn't just a word, it was a promise. As I walked out of the house, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I wasn't just leaving Emily. I was preparing to make her feel the weight of her choices. Revenge wasn't about lashing out. It was about setting the record straight and making sure she felt the consequences of her betrayal. First, I called a lawyer, determined to begin divorce proceedings immediately. There would be no reconciliation, no second chances. The lawyer, a no-nonsense professional named Carter, promised to expedite the process. If she tries to play games, he said, we'll be ready. Next, I made a visit to Mr. Hammond's office. Not to confront him directly. I had bigger plans than a public shouting match, but to lay the groundwork. I walked into the building with purpose and headed straight to Greg, my quiet ally in the security booth. I'm going to need your help one last time, I said, sliding a USB drive across the counter. Greg raised an eyebrow but nodded. What's the plan? I want this footage secured, I said. If Hammond tries to spin this or retaliate, I'll have everything I need to expose him. Greg gave a low whistle. You're not playing around. Not anymore. After that, I reached out to some trusted colleagues, subtly hinting at Hammond's improprieties. I didn't give them the full story yet, just enough to sow doubt in their minds about his character. Hammond thrived on his reputation as a professional leader, and I intended to tarnish it. The final step was personal. I gathered every sentimental item Emily and I had accumulated over the years, photos, trinkets, love letters, and packed them neatly into a box. I wasn't going to burn them or destroy them in some dramatic display. Instead, I left them on the doorstep of her sister's house with a note. This is all that's left. It's over. When I returned to my temporary apartment that night, I felt lighter but far from satisfied. The wheels were in motion, but I wasn't done yet. Emily had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. Now, it was her turn to face the fallout. But what about Hammond? Oh, he wasn't off the hook yet. Mr. Hammond prided himself on his spotless reputation. At company events, he was the picture of professionalism, always speaking with authority and confidence. But I knew the truth now, and I intended to expose it in a way that would leave no room for him to recover. The first strike came quietly. I sent an anonymous email to the board of directors, attaching the damning security footage. I kept the tone factual and professional. Dear board members, it has come to my attention that inappropriate conduct has occurred within our organization. The attached footage will provide the necessary context. I trust you will handle this with the seriousness it deserves. I knew this would send shockwaves through the company. Hammond's cozy relationship with the board couldn't shield him from the reality of the evidence. The second strike was more personal. Hammond had made a career out of cultivating connections, but I knew a few of his rivals within the industry. A discreet phone call to the right people ensured that whispers of his misconduct spread beyond our office walls. By the time the board confronted him, his reputation in the industry would already be crumbling. While waiting for the fallout, I made sure to fortify my position within the company. My work on the promotion wasn't just a formality, it was excellent. I spent the next few days refining my pitch, ensuring that even without Hammond's favor, I'd stand out as the obvious choice for the role. The dominoes started to fall quickly. By the end of the week, rumors about Hammond's behavior began circulating in hushed tones around the office. His usually confident demeanor faltered, and I caught him leaving the building early more than once, looking over his shoulder like a man being hunted. A week later, the board called an emergency meeting. Though I wasn't privy to the discussions, the result was clear. Hammond resigned to pursue other opportunities. The official announcement was vague, but everyone knew what it meant. Hammond was finished. That evening, Greg called me. "It's done," he said simply. "Thanks for everything," I replied. "Take care, Jack," Greg said. "You deserve better than what they put you through." I hung up, a small smile tugging at my lips. Emily had chosen to betray me with Hammond, a man who wielded power and influence as his shield. Now, that shield was gone, and so was her safety net. But there was one final move left to make. With Hammond out of the picture and my divorce proceedings underway, Emily's world began to crumble. She called me repeatedly, her messages oscillating between desperation and anger. "Jack, please, just talk to me," one voicemail pleaded. "We can fix this." Another was more accusatory. "You're just throwing everything away. You're being vindictive." I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on ensuring my own stability. The promotion was officially mine within days of Hammond's resignation. The board commended my professionalism and dedication, praising my work ethic in a way that felt oddly hollow. I accepted the role, not for the validation but for the leverage it gave me to start fresh. Emily, on the other hand, was floundering. Her carefully constructed story unraveled as Hammond's disgrace became public knowledge. Friends she had confided in began to distance themselves, and her sister, a close ally, reached out to me in quiet disbelief. She admitted what happened, her sister said over the phone. "I don't even recognize her anymore." "I'm so sorry, Jack." "It's not your fault," I replied evenly. I hadn't spoken to Emily since the night I left, but when she showed up unannounced at my new apartment, I realized she wasn't done trying to salvage what little remained. "Jack," she began, her voice shaking as I opened the door. "I just need to talk to you." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "There's nothing to say." "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "I was stupid. I made a mistake. No, a series of mistakes. But it didn't mean anything. I swear to you, I never stopped loving you." Her words hit me like hollow echoes. Once, they might have moved me. Now, they felt like the desperate pleas of a woman who'd lost everything and was scrambling to hold onto the last shred of familiarity. "You didn't love me, Emily," I said, my tone colder than I'd ever thought possible. "If you did, you wouldn't have done this. You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything we built." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't waver. "I've already filed for divorce," I continued, "and you'll hear from my lawyer if you try to fight it. I don't want to see you, talk to you, or think about you again." She crumpled into herself, sobbing, but I didn't offer her comfort. Instead, I stepped back and closed the door, the sound of the latch clicking echoing in the quiet hallway. For the first time in months, I felt free. As the weeks passed, I threw myself into my new role, reconnecting with old friends and hobbies I'd long neglected. Therapy helped me process the betrayal and ensured I wouldn't carry the weight of Emily's choices into my future. Revenge wasn't about destroying her life. It was about reclaiming mine. Emily's actions had burned everything to the ground, but from the ashes, I was building something new. I had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. I'd never let anyone take my trust for granted again.